footprints in their history stretch back 5,000 years. But for the world's greatest wall builders, makers of a forbidden city, what happens tonight is not merely a small step, but a great leap. China is welcoming the world. Who will they be when this is over? The clock of their lives has been beating with a screaming urgency. They have pushed themselves to be as sharp as a razor's edge. For this summer, to be here, now, and nowhere else. Beijing, the first ever Olympics for the world's most populous nation. 1.3 billion who framed the front page story of the 21st century. A China both outside time and bursting every which way in a bewildering rush of transformation. They have made themselves anew, relentlessly, devotedly, so they might, on these days, step into history. They've submitted to an uncompromising search for mastery.
Those arms working.
Repetitive motion. Technique polished toward an impossible ideal. Fall, fail, get up.
It's not the triumph,
but the struggle.
It's not the triumph, but the struggle.
It's not the triumph, but the struggle.
Not the triumph, but the struggle.
Why did they begin? Why do they endure?
08年的奥运会在北京，在自己家门口，所以就会一直继续坚持。
I compete because I want to run faster than any man has ever run.
Flipping on a 4-inch beam. I like the daredevil part of it.
You know, to get the chance to try to defend your gold medal, I couldn't write a better story.
当然，中国男子运动员第一个拿到金牌的，所以说我也才会被大家记忆。
It is time for the colorful clash of a universe of shimmering, still-to-be-written biographies. It is time to chase eternal youth. Time to defy public heartbreak, laws of gravity. Time for a Jamaican lightning bolt, California brilliance. It is time for the sweetly engaging gymnast from West Des Moines and the poised daughter of a decorated Olympian. It is time for the one who has endured the grinding burden of mind-blowing expectations. Time for the headliner of the Athens Games to play Superman all over. Are we about to see the fastest race ever? A dynasty confirmed? A victory cheered by 1 billion voices? They have pushed themselves to be as sharp as a razor's edge for the scintillating prospect of enduring accomplishment, to leave these games as the greatest Olympic champion of all time. They have made themselves anew for this summer, for Beijing, for this now.
6 miles north of the Forbidden City, this is center stage for the games of the 29th Olympiad, a sprawling complex of stunning venues called the Olympic Green. The jewel, the brand new audacious Olympic Stadium, also known as the Bird's Nest, site of the opening ceremony of these Beijing Olympic Games. Good evening. I'm Jim Lampley, joining you from the International Broadcast Center in Beijing, China. 20 minutes from now, we'll bring you the start of the opening ceremony, a show fashioned to be a spectacle without equal in Olympic history. 15,000 cast members in a futuristic production that exceeds even the most lavish of Hollywood blockbusters. Also, as we count down to the beginning of the ceremony, we'll hear from Bob Costas and Matt Lauer, and U.S. athletes who will be a part of the Parade of Nations. But next, Tom Brokaw for an overview of just how much these games and this night mean to the Chinese people. On 8808, this is the center of the universe for a nation of 1.3 billion people, all wishing they could be here. The longest torch relay in history, 4 months across the entire globe, here in its final destination, the Olympic City. And as we come back to Beijing, I'm joined now by Tom Brokaw as we prepare for an Olympic Games which has already had a historic impact on China. Tom?
Jim, for the people of China, this is a night of great consequence and patriotic pride that cannot be underestimated. A night for the Chinese people to stand tall.
The games of the 29 Olympiad are awarded to the city of Beijing.
7 years ago, July 2001, in Moscow, the International Olympic Committee chose Beijing to host these games. In Tiananmen Square, hundreds of thousands celebrated. For China, the successful Olympic bid was a validation of its hard-fought reawakening after the painful memories of foreign occupation, the Cultural Revolution, years of isolation. As soon as the cheering quieted, Beijing would be transformed by a building boom as vast, as visual as any in world history. A fortune of $40 billion spent to make the capital a city of tomorrow, so far removed from the deprivations and the self-imposed exile of the China of not so long ago. In one sense, this night is the culmination of events set in motion by another sports story. The surprising decision of Mao Zedong in 1971 to invite the American table tennis team to Beijing. The headline-making sensation of ping-pong diplomacy was followed a year later by the arrival of then U.S. President Richard Nixon. China was prepared to finally move beyond its walls. But culturally, and especially politically, China and the West have an uneasy relationship. This spring's worldwide torch relay was conceived by the Chinese as a gesture of international goodwill. But violence flared. Demonstrators angrily protesting China's actions in Tibet and Sudan. There was shock, anger, injured pride in China. Jin Jing, the Chinese Paralympian who shielded the torch from protesters in Paris, became a national hero. But the protest also brought home to the Chinese people a troubling reality. Their self-image was not shared by many others in the world. Shortly thereafter, in mid-May, an even greater blow.
The numbers out of China we are seeing tonight, they're staggering. After a massive disaster, they are scrambling to find people to save.
The cataclysmic earthquake that struck the Sichuan province killed an estimated 70,000 and created 5 million homeless. In a society with a one-child policy, families were instantly shattered. And this time, the Chinese government could not keep from the world or its own citizens the heartbreaking images or the rage and despair of the victims. There are so many Chinas. This is a country where 500 million people live on $2 a day, but where hundreds of millions now experience modern prosperity. It is a country where the few rule the many. where protest is not welcome. A country that still can't shake the echoes of the 1989 Tiananmen crackdown. It is a country racing into the future, confident it can claim its place on its own terms. It has been a long, long march to August 8, 2008, to this moment when a historically insular civilization has invited the world to a global event of epic proportions. A long march to a night that may be the most significant in modern Chinese history.
An appropriately vast perspective, and now the 17 momentous days. What do you think we might expect, Tom?
Jim, there are two great walls in this country, the Great Wall the tourists go to and the Great Wall surrounding the ruling class. The rulers believe first and foremost in control. We'll see how much they're challenged. So I think at the end of 17 days, we'll either have a giant step forward or maybe 2 steps back. My standing rule is don't assume you know what the Chinese government will do.
Thanks very much, Tom Brokaw. Coming up next, we'll go out to Bob Costas and Matt Lauer at the Olympic Stadium on 8/8/08 for this moment, so fervently anticipated in China, the beginning of the opening ceremony.
Approaching 8 p.m. Friday in Beijing, 8/8/08. The moment has arrived, and the focus of China and the world is on the National Stadium, better known as the Bird's Nest, a beacon of energy and excitement in the middle of the Olympic green, an ultra-modern structure that at the same time suggests a tangle of twigs, and where some 91,000 people have come to witness an opening ceremony of unprecedented scope. Hello, everyone, and welcome to these Beijing Olympic Games. Bob Costas with Matt Lauer. Matt, this is an Olympics unlike any other. So many aspects will play out over the next 2.5 weeks. But right now, as we stand here, above all, anticipation and excitement.
There's no question about it. You've done this a lot in the past. This is my first ride, and what a ride it's going to be. So much has been said about China in the months and weeks leading up to these Olympic Games. A lot about politics. We'll set that aside right now. And an awful lot about sheer size. It's a vast nation with that huge population you've heard a lot about, 1.3 billion people, roughly 4 times the size of the U.S. population. We've seen large chunks of this show, and I think we'll both say what you're going to see tonight is in perfect agreement with the scale of this country. It's a big show. We're not hyping here, it's a fact. 15,000 performers will take to the stadium floor. That's a record.
11,000 athletes, a little less than 11,000, 15,000 performers, a $300 million production, 10 times what Athens spent 4 years ago, and it's in the hands of Zhang Yimou, who is the most esteemed film director in China. We're about to see what happens when an artist gets nearly unlimited resources. It's almost a cinematic presentation playing out in real time.
A lot obviously has been planned in advance. Some will be unpredictable because of politics. What's going to happen? What response will President Bush get, for example, when he joins dignitaries like Hu Jintao, the president of the People's Republic of China? What's the response going to be to Nicolas Sarkozy, the president of France, who angered some people in China with talk of an early boycott? He's gone back on that. And what response will we hear when the delegations from North Korea, Iran, and Iraq enter this stadium? So at times tonight, we'll just sit back and listen.
So many interesting aspects about to play out, and to get some kind of insight from the Chinese perspective, we bring in NBC's China analyst, the former foreign editor of Time magazine, Joshua Cooper Ramo.
Bob, a pleasure to be here tonight. The Chinese tonight reaching their hands out to the world in a really unprecedented way. A Chinese friend of mine said to me last week, this is, for us, the moonshot. It is the riskiest thing we have ever done. So some of the energy we feel here in the Bird's Nest tonight is the nervousness of a nation about to put a match to a fuse of a rocket.
A lot of people have been lining up, Bob, for hours before the opening ceremony about to get underway, and I think Joshua said it right. There's a lot of energy in this stadium tonight.
And especially among the athletes themselves who will shortly march in here. Let's check in with some of them. Andrea Joyce is at the National Indoor Stadium. Andrea.
I am with the rock stars of beach volleyball, Misty May Trainer and Carrie Walsh. And you guys have been here 3 times. This is your 3rd Olympics, but you kind of look like kids in a candy store. What's your favorite part about this night, Carrie?
You know, I exactly feel like a kid in a candy store. I'm so happy. You know, my favorite part about this night, we just got to hang out with George Bush, Mr. President, and his brother, and his dad, and his wife, and his daughter, and that was the most special part. But we're so excited to walk into the stadium.
It's so much fun, and I have to ask you, Misty, you guys come in here as the overwhelming favorites. You're the Olympic gold medalists from 2004, 3 straight world titles. What's that pressure like?
It's a lot of pressure, but we put it on ourselves. You know, we want to be the best team out there. We want to, you know, celebrate with the rest of the U.S. and hopefully they're going to be right there with us. But we have a large target on our back, and everybody.
I was just going to say I could feel it right now. All right, have fun and good luck.
Thank you. Good to see you.
Let's go over to Bob.
And thanks, Andrea. These gentlemen need no introduction. Kobe and LeBron. And Kobe, you've represented the Lakers to 3 NBA titles, now representing the USA. Looking for a gold medal. How are the quests different for you?
Well, it's a completely different challenge. I mean, you're facing opposition that you're not familiar with. You know, in the NBA, you obviously have opportunity to play them many, many times. You know, here's a whole new ball game, and we're just really excited to represent our country.
LeBron, the team has had oodles of talent before, spotty results. What are you guys going to do to kind of cohesively bring all this talent together this year?
Well, I think one thing we've been able to do is make the commitment to, understanding what it means to be an Olympian, understanding what it means to wear this red, white, and blue, and not just representing Los Angeles or Cleveland, but at the same time representing, the whole United States of America. So it's a big thing for us, and we understand it.
Thanks, guys. Good luck. Enjoy the ceremony. Let's go back to Bob.
All right, Bob, thanks. And the opening ceremony commences from Beijing as soon as we come back. Just a very few moments now from the start of the opening ceremony, and the dignitaries among the 91,000 in attendance are making their way toward their seats. As Chinese President Hu Jintao enters, along with the president of the IOC, Jacques Rogge, some 80 heads of state are here, including President Bush, the first sitting American president to attend a non-American Olympics. Now, as you know, President Bush had been urged by many, both in and outside America, to boycott these games, or at least the opening ceremony, but he's made it clear for months that he intended to come, A, to support U.S. athletes, and B, to show respect for China and its accomplishments, which he believes will lead to more constructive dialogue than if he had offended them by not attending.
Yeah, but it doesn't say that he's taken a soft line on the plane on the way over here. He talked about some of the problems he has with China, and then again yesterday, Bob, in a very strong speech in Thailand, he talked about things like China's record on human rights, on freedom of speech, freedom of religion, the jailing of dissidents, freedom of the press. But then, as you said, but wait a second, we encourage them and acknowledge their efforts on behalf of negotiations over North Korea and their nuclear ambitions, and Iran, which is still an unresolved situation.
Now, President Bush will meet with Hu Jintao over the weekend, and he promises a candid exchange of ideas, and presumably the subjects which Matt just alluded to will be included, as well as others, because there are an array of issues.
And I guess this is the point. China and its emergence and its power forces a lot of countries and their leaders to operate in a gray area. It can't be black and white, because while you agree on some things, you don't agree on others. And it can't be a firm line. It's got to be a bit of give and take.
And here is President Bush and the First Lady.
We understand his daughter Barbara is supposed to attend as well. By the way, another Bush in attendance tonight. We like to call him 41, the former president of the United States, and a guy who spent a lot of time here in the 1970s, George Herbert Walker Bush.
Before there was an official ambassador's position, U.S. ambassador to China, he was kind of a special envoy.
That's right. President Bush's father was offered a job back in the early 70s, 2 plum assignments to either have the ambassadorship to Great Britain or France. He said, no, I see a future in China. Send me to Beijing.
And he has returned here countless times. It's a subject which fascinates him, and he has long-standing relations with the Chinese leadership.
And as they continue to seat the dignitaries, First Lady Laura Bush acknowledging the guest to her right, we're about to get underway here with a countdown.
exactly 2008 performers stand behind faux drums, which is an instrument of ancient China. The drums were discovered in 2005 during an excavation of a tomb near Shanghai, which dated to around 500 BC. And these drummers will take us to the countdown.
Mesdames et messieurs, le président de la République populaire de Chine, Monsieur Hu Jintao, et le président
You'll hear all announcements tonight in 3 languages, French and English, the official languages of the Olympics, and the language, China in this case, of the host nation.
Although, Bob, that was just an announcement that needed no language at all.
Olympic Committee, Mr. Jacques Roy. 女士们、先生们，欢迎中华人民共和国主席胡锦涛先生。 国际奥林匹克委员会主席雅克罗格先生
Jacques Roger, the former Olympian himself, president of the IOC in attendance alongside Hu Jintao.
How about those drummers? Almost fierce precision.
Going through a countdown with minute detail. And by the way, we'll make reference of the smiles a little later on.
The words of Confucius here, 2,500 years ago. To welcome friends from far away, isn't that a good thing? Written at a time when stability in China was as unimaginable in a way as these games, this ceremony tonight, would have been for Chinese 30 years ago.
Bob, a nation of 1.3 billion putting on a show like this, and people at home are not alone if they're saying it's both awe-inspiring and perhaps a little intimidating. But they told these drummers earlier in a rehearsal to smile more, and that's taken some of the edge off of it. Some. ...2008 drummers with a rousing start to the 2008 Olympics, and we'll be back.
The games of the 29th Olympiad on NBC are brought to you by...
Welcome back to Beijing, the opening ceremony of the 2008 Summer Games. You're looking now at the footsteps of history, quite literally, coming from the old center of Beijing near Tiananmen Square to the new area of Beijing, this national stadium along the north-south axis. You're looking at a cinematic device employed by Zhang Yimou here. This is actually almost animation, a footstep a second, 29 in all, to signify the 29 Olympiads.
We said earlier that aspects of this opening ceremony are almost like cinema in real time. Well, this is quite literally cinematic.
This is signifying China's march of history outward from the center of Beijing. And now the footsteps arrive at the stadium.
The ceremony tonight is going to touch on each of the three great Chinese philosophical traditions, Confucianism, Taoism, and Buddhism. And these flying figures here, these apsaras, will be familiar to anybody who has seen Buddhist iconography anywhere in the world. They symbolize peace and harmony and can be found in the Dunhuang Caves, which are wonderfully preserved Buddhist art masterpieces out in the desert area of Gansu province.
The apsaras are in effect like muses, right?
That's right. They're part of the sort of magical spirit that comes, that brings both great joy and often great prosperity.
This song is called Dream Rings, about harmony and the world coming together to celebrate.
And now, as if by magic, those dream rings are lifted from the floor of the stadium. Just some of the technology and engineering that you're going to be seeing an awful lot of tonight.
And I think it's also worth noting here, one of the structures of traditional Chinese narrative we're seeing, which is this alternation between loud and soft, between light and dark, between that tremendous mass of the individual, of the opening, and now this very delicate flower-like set of rings rising to the roof of the stadium.
Now 56 children representing the 56 ethnic groups of China carry their nation's flag. This little girl is named Lin Miaoke. She's 9 years old, lives here in Beijing, and she's singing a song called A Hymn to My Country.
President Bush still talking to Vladimir Putin, perhaps talking about that opening drum number still.
Hard to overstate the universal sense of pride, any other differences aside, among the billion-plus Chinese. In the days leading up to this opening ceremony, sales of Chinese flags went up some 30 times over.
Bob, you mentioned that the young lady singing's from Beijing. All the children you're going to be seeing tonight are, it's important to the organizers, are average Chinese children from average families chosen from some art schools around the area.
Joshua, what do we make of this now, from the children to the soldiers?
I think it's a profound statement that will resonate in the hearts of the more than 1 billion Chinese watching this tonight. The idea that the state is the guarantor of the future of those children in a country that for so long could not guarantee the safety or stability of the society for generations of children.
Mesdames et messieurs, prière de vous lever pour l'hymne national chinois.
Ladies and gentlemen, please stand for the Chinese national anthem.
女士们、先生们
The Chinese anthem is entitled March of the Volunteers.
国旗，奏中华人民共和国国歌。
used to hearing that song as the host country figures to be at the top of the podium many, many times during these games.
We're back in Beijing, looking down at the floor of the National Stadium. Let's just call it the Bird's Nest from now on. This ceremony will be divided into two portions: Chinese history and modern times. And Joshua, here we're taking a journey not only through time, but key elements of Chinese culture.
That's right, Matt. And we begin here with something highly symbolic, a blank sheet of paper expressing the wish of the Chinese for people around the world as they look at this country over the next 17 days to fill a blank sheet of paper with new images and maybe to replace images that the Chinese themselves, in many cases, are eager to leave behind.
And as the scroll unfolds, we're about to see a display of the ancient Chinese art of calligraphy and painting.
In a sense, that's right. The three great brush arts of traditional Chinese culture: painting, calligraphy, and poetry. What's coming together here are the very first strokes of what is known as a shan shui painting, a mountains and waters painting, one of the oldest Chinese art forms, probably about 1,000 years old, designed to express harmony, the balance between the mountains and the water.
That instrument is a guqin. I hope I pronounced that correctly, Joshua.
And that sound, Bob, the almost mournful noise that comes from those strings is something that reaches right into the heart of any Chinese.
That instrument is sometimes called the father of Chinese music, or even sometimes the instrument of the sages.
As we watch these dancers here, it's worth keeping in mind in these traditional Chinese arts, their quality was not judged by how realistic they are, by how much fidelity they have to nature, but by the idea that they should express the inner spirit of the master, that the movement of the brush should represent the soul of the artist. So these dancers here, using their own bodies as brushes, showing again the Chinese conception that there is no distinction in the end between the artist and the work of art.
And not to distract from the beauty of this, but just some people at home might be looking at the floor and saying, how are they accomplishing that beautiful image on the floor? This is one of the world's largest LED screens. Again, technology and engineering, 230 feet long by 70 feet wide, and it will even get bigger as this night progresses.
Matt, we've said this is going to be a night of contrasts, and here again you see the most modern dance moves creating the most ancient style of painting.
The opening ceremony from Beijing already seeming unlike any other. Back after this. Now the portion of the opening ceremony artistic director Zhang Yimou refers to as Confucius Travels, as 810 disciples of Confucius appear holding bamboo scrolls.
Bob, yeah, we're back here in one of the really powerful Chinese traditions, Confucian thought. Confucius was a scholar who lived 2,500 years ago in an unbelievably chaotic time in Chinese history known as the Spring and Autumn period, who wandered around giving advice to leaders about how to have order, how to have harmony in a society.
And the bamboo scrolls, if anyone asked the question, what's significant about holding the Olympics in China? Well, how many places could you go around the world where the culture is old enough where you can say, oh, by the way, the Chinese invented paper and printing, and that's actually true here.
And in fact, this is a symbolic statement, as we see in the middle of the stadium right now, the bamboo giving way piece by piece and then rising up from the center of the stage now, Chinese movable printing blocks. This moving blocks, which are eliciting quite a reaction here in the bird's nest, are evoking something that many Chinese viewers will recognize. This is wind, and recalls one of Confucius's most famous phrases, the idea that the virtuous leader can pass across his subjects with the ease of the wind.
Time after time, we've seen it in this opening ceremony already. Massive scope, minute precision.
And there is the Chinese character for harmony, which will make a number of appearances tonight. A core philosophical conception.
And a core political ideal as well. Hu Jintao talks constantly about the harmonious society.
That's right. The idea of a 和谐社会, or a harmonious society, really right at the heart of Chinese political doctrine at the moment.
Glad you said that.
Here, by the way, is another image that evokes that same tradition, the notion of drops of water spilling onto an empty pond, that sort of stillness and silence that comes from Confucian self-cultivation, but also appears, of course, in the Taoist and the Buddhist traditions as a mark of inner peace leading to external peace. Then there's the character for harmony again. You know, one of the unusual things about spending so much time talking about harmony in China today is there are so many profoundly disharmonious things here in a way, the challenges with the environment, with urbanization and so forth. So this is really representing an ideal for the Chinese as they watch this.
I think you said it so well, Bob, earlier. This is Zhang Yimou creating a cinematic blockbuster in real time on the floor of a stadium.
Harmony making its third appearance there. now a symbol that is perhaps the most famous in China, the Great Wall, 4,000 miles long, built and rebuilt over almost a 1,000-year period as this country tried to keep barbarians out. And now in a moment of symbolism that is just remarkable, the director Zhang Yimou brings the Great Wall down and replaces it with blossoming plum flowers, the Chinese symbol for openness.
Again, the reconciling of opposites.
Absolutely, and again, a desire to replace one image of China with another one.
And how'd they do it? They did it with people, not computers, not hydraulics, people. It's unbelievable.
Jaw-dropping. Don't go away. Why would you? Back at the Bird's Nest in Beijing, Bob Costas, Matt Lauer, and NBC's China analyst Joshua Cooper-Ramo.
You know, Bob, as Chinese people look at their own history, the moment they will almost all tell you was the greatest was the Tang Dynasty. And part of the reason they feel it was so spectacular was because it was a time when China was incredibly open. Of course, most famous for the Silk Route, which opened during that time. The sense of China literally, like this dancer in a way, casting their most precious things, silk and Chinese cultural values, out to the world, and getting in return all sorts of amazing ideas. You can almost see in her headdress here, it almost looks Indian to some degree, a reflection of the tremendous openness of China at that time, and the result, which was an unbelievable cultural and economic blossoming.
And as you gave us a crash course on this over the last several days, Joshua, you talked not only about openness, but the symbolism of this one dancer being supported by these many beneath her.
That's right. I think it's a fundamental issue in the nature of Chinese culture about the relationship between the one and the many. And Zhang Yimou, who is a master of visual symbolism, obviously here sending a message that great accomplishments, great individual accomplishments, particularly in this society, rely on much more than the individual alone.
Joshua, who are these guys?
You know, the Chinese have a wonderful maritime tradition, and this segment is meant to evoke figuratively, obviously, another way in which China was open to the world and expanding trade, and in particular the adventures of China's own Christopher Columbus, a navigator named Zheng He, who was perhaps the first really to master the use of magnetic compasses, something that was also developed in China as he navigated around the world.
I want to draw your attention to the membrane or scrim that is at the top of this stadium. It's massive. It goes the entire way around, and now projected on that screen, images of the sea. And this really leads us to believe that Zhang Yimou came up with an artistic dream and then said to the people here, now build me a stadium that can accommodate it. It's a stunning image.
Yeah, this stadium clearly was designed with this opening ceremony in mind. Now, eventually, it'll be converted somewhat. The capacity will go from 90,000 to 80,000, and it will house Beijing's soccer team. But the main purpose of this stadium is right now.
And that scrim remains. That's a permanent feature.
We see unfolding on the massive screen now images of China's naval history.
Bob, we talked about scope and scale at the beginning of the show. So not just a dozen oarsmen, but seemingly thousands. Not just a screen at the top of the stadium that stretches for a few feet. This one stretches over a quarter of a mile. Everything bigger here in China.
Well, when we remarked in the run-up to Zhang Yimou about how remarkable it was to have some 15,000 performers, none of whom repeat, by the way, 15,000 individual performers, his deadpan reply was, well, we have the people.
Normally you see something on this scale, Bob, you see wires being pulled, people directing the masses, telling them where to go. None of that. They seem to know this cold.
With Matt Lauer and NBC's China analyst Joshua Cooper Ramo, Bob Costas at the opening ceremony, which now pays tribute to the grandeur of China's dynastic history. And Joshua, it's almost become a cliche over the last few months to say that this is China's coming out party. And we all understand the sense in which that applies. But to many people in China, this is really a return to glory, a moment of redemption.
That's right. And the Chinese will be very quick to tell you that for 9 of the last 10 centuries, they had the biggest GDP on the planet. But it's also important to keep in mind they're very aware nothing ends when the games end. The process of reform and opening only gets more complex from this point on.
All right, let's do this. We're 3 guys sitting in what will soon be a soccer stadium talking about LEDs and drums, but you know what? This is one of those moments where we have to stop and ooh and ah a little bit about the costumes. Zhang Yimou putting on a fashion show on the floor here. Look at the colors, look at the detail, look at the numbers of costumes he had to create for this show.
And consider these performers in often heavy costumes in oppressive heat and humidity.
One of the wonderful things about China, frankly, is there's this incredible attention to little tiny details. Watch the way these women move their hands. You can see this in tea houses and even in McDonald's in China. Just a leftover cultural emphasis on the way that tiniest gestures matter so much.
So you order a Big Mac and fries in Beijing and they present it to you with a conspicuous elegance?
For you, yes, and a dance.
That's the way they do it in Manhattan, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah, there's that LED screen again, now stretching almost 500 feet on the floor of the stadium. While you were away watching commercials, China has advanced some couple of hundred years. We told you this show would be divided into the ancient and the modern. We've now arrived at the modern, and I guess we can put an estimated year on this, Joshua, somewhere around 1978.
Yeah, I think that's about right, when the period of reform and opening began in China.
At the piano, one of China's most popular musicians, 26-year-old Lang Lang. He's a megastar here in China. And the little girl is Li Muzi, who is just 7 years old and has only been playing piano for about a year.
Tell a little story here as these people light up on the floor of the stadium. The first time this was rehearsed about a week ago, they were all wearing black costumes. Zhang Yimou apparently didn't like it, said change them. 3 days later, they were this green color. He said, I like that, make me 2007 more. And here we are on a Friday night.
And I'll tell you, Matt, you know, we were talking earlier about how to date this. No Chinese watching this at home needs a calendar to know what this is. This is that amazing moment when China began to plug into the world, when it began to light up, even chromatically, when it went from a world of brown and gray Mao suits to bright, vivid colors and individuals deciding on the lives that they wanted to live for themselves.
And as the Starmen prepare to go on the move once again, this time, watch, they'll take the shape of what's become a symbol of national pride and joy, the National Stadium, or the Bird's Nest.
And overhead, a large kite appears. The Chinese invented the kite, and Beijing is sometimes called the city of kites. And this young lady is 9-year-old Zhu Chao Yan. Her nickname is Chow Chow. And she is, it is safe to assume, having the time of her young life. The opening ceremony of the 2008 Beijing Olympic Games continues in just a moment. Bob Costas, Matt Lauer, and NBC's China analyst Joshua Cooper Ramo. Hundreds of millions of Chinese are said to practice, not only recognize, but personally practice the graceful martial art of Tai Chi every day, Joshua.
That's right. You know, one of the key beliefs of Chinese philosophy is this notion that there's this energy, this Qi, which permeates everything. Mountains, waters, even your own body. And so this is almost a form of Chinese medicine, the moving the Qi around your body. And the masterful precision of these artists for Chinese who are familiar with this technique will be immediately apparent.
Again, putting the entire stadium to spectacular use with the images on the membrane at the top, creating a waterfall. And water so important, again, culturally.
It is. Zhuangzi, probably the most famous Taoist writer, says that true virtue, the great life, is lived like water, flowing easily, moving away from resistance and collision, always delicate, graceful, and calm.
The theme now here, Joshua, changes, and this may be lost on some people watching at home, so why don't we give them a little bit of a heads up to this?
You know, this is Zhang Yimou pointing at the many problems in a way that face not only China but the world, the problems of global warming, the problems of resource depletion, and the burden that that places on the next generation, which is going to have to solve them. And I'll tell you, right, to a Western audience, looking at a bunch of guys basically doing karate around a group of school children may be kind of confusing, but the message here is very clear. The harmony of the Tai Chi master, the belief in harmony between man and nature, is really the only hope for the kind of sustainable development for China and for other nations over the next few years.
And again, because it's China, if you liked a dozen or so Tai Chi masters, how about 2,008 of them? You know how hard this is? Not the Tai Chi part, but get 10 friends, stand them up and say, now form a circle. And here we've got 2,008 of them forming perfect circles. There are no markings on these floors. It's all based on an awareness of where they are as compared to their neighbor. And although the specifics of this performance obviously were choreographed, all 2,008 of these performers are familiar with and have practiced Tai Chi throughout their lives, so the basic principles of it come naturally to them now.
That's right, and they've actually selected even here a series of moves which emphasize one of the interesting characteristics of Tai Chi, which is movement in one direction often begins with a very subtle move in the opposite direction.
You talk about precision. One misstep here, you're talking about craniums colliding at high speed.
And look at the perfection of the circles again. And now the Tai Chi performers and the kids themselves looking up towards the roof of the stadium, where on the giant scrim are appearing images of a hopeful time, a moment when birds return, when the conflicts between man and nature have been resolved, and where a model that allows both prosperity and environmentalism flourishes. There's the Shan Shui painting again, augmented now by the children who've drawn the smiley face there in the upper right-hand corner.
We'll touch on this a little later on, but that painting will have a much longer life than just here at the opening ceremony. We're back with the creative portion of the opening ceremony here in Beijing. Bird's Nest Stadium, a perfect host to this incredible artistic vision of Zhang Yimou. And we're looking now at what we're calling taikonauts. Explain that, Joshua.
Well, there are 3 of them, and that is how many astronauts, taikonauts as the Chinese call them, they have put into space. China with a plan to put a man on the moon by 2024, but a moment of tremendous national pride when the first astronauts went into space a couple of years ago.
think there isn't some athleticism involved here?
8 months of training for these dancers. The hardest part, apparently, the ones running around the equator where they have to stand more or less sideways.
At the top of the globe, 2 singers. One is Lu Huan, who is a very big pop star in China. And the second might be more recognizable to an American audience. It's Sarah Brightman, one of the stars of the original cast of Phantom of the Opera, who is also very popular here in China. The name of the song is You and Me.
these games, and as Joshua said before, if not a reality now, maybe the Chinese are saying a hope for the future.
There are and will be issues and disagreements surrounding these games, but I don't see how anyone could dispute the quality of this opening ceremony. What a stunning, stunning achievement. The Parade of Nations is next.